Hello and welcome to Parallel Live. This is our first parallel event of 2021. I'm Perry Ann Boring, the founder and president of the Chamber of Digital Commerce and host of Parallel. Parallel is a community-led content platform where the most important innovators, policymakers, investors, and companies gather to share their ideas, explain specific use cases, and offer their views on the explosive digital asset and blockchain industry. 2021 is a year of many transitions. Economies are transitioning from the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. Leadership is transitioning in Washington from a Republican to a Democratic administration. And we're seeing a digital transformation across the global economy as more and more people and organizations are relying on digital systems to interact and transact daily. And cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology is a key topic of conversation across all of these themes. With it being a new year and a new administration, the industry will face many new risks and new opportunities. Today, we're joined by two of America's leaders in promoting the advancement of the digital asset industry, U.S. Senator Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming and the Mayor of Miami, Francis Suarez. And here to lead us in our first conversation is Alan Cohn, partner at Steptoe. Alan, over to you.
Thanks so much, Perry Ann, and thank you for the invitation to join. As Perry Ann said, I'm a partner at Steptoe & Johnson in Washington, D.C. I'm the co-chair of Steptoe's blockchain and cryptocurrency practice. Steptoe also administers the Blockchain Alliance, which helps connect industry to law enforcement and regulatory agencies in order to help increase the level of education on crypto asset issues, which I know is an issue that is of significant interest to Senator Lummis as well. Before coming to Steptoe 6 years ago, I served as an assistant secretary and deputy assistant secretary at the Department of Homeland Security during both the Obama and Bush administrations. But we're really honored, as Perry Ann noted, to be joined today by Senator Cynthia Lummis, U.S. Senator from Wyoming, and then we'll be joined as well by Francis Suarez, the mayor of Miami. We're going to have the opportunity to talk first to Senator Lummis, and then Mayor Suarez is going to join us about halfway into our discussion. So Senator Lummis served prior to being elected to the U.S. Senate. She served as Wyoming's single at-large member of the U.S. House of Representatives from 2009 to 2017, and has a very interesting background in government law and ranching and other activities in Wyoming, stretching back many years. So Senator Lummis, can we start by maybe you telling the listeners and viewers a little bit about your background and your personal journey to crypto assets and financial innovation issues?
Absolutely. There are two main influences on what brought me to crypto assets and specifically Bitcoin. One was when I was Wyoming State Treasurer, I invested Wyoming's permanent funds, including Wyoming's Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, which takes minerals from the ground, converts them to US dollars, and then is invested in a diversified asset allocation. So when I was state treasurer, I was always looking for a good store of value. We wanted some investments that would produce short-term income because all of the income, dividends, and realized capital gains off our permanent funds were used in our general fund. But we also wanted long-term stores of value because we were taking minerals out of the ground, which is a long-term store of value, converting them to cash, and we wanted to have some assets in our portfolio that continued to be a long-term store of value. That's where I see Bitcoin being the leader in this century. Then later, when I was in the Congress and I watched us go from when I joined Congress, $9 trillion in debt to the current almost $28 trillion in debt, we are debasing the US dollar. The United States Congress is not going to be able to pay this back. And we're going to be considering a $1.9 trillion additional debt next week under the guise of a COVID bill, but it's a big spending bill, and then a huge infrastructure bill following that. So the debt is going to continue to not only accumulate, but accelerate, further debasing the value of the US dollar. So we need to find some assets that people can save. So when they do retire, or when governments need long-term assets that are going to increase in value, they have some options. And by my way of thinking, the best option available right now is Bitcoin. So I have become very interested in digital assets, and then I'll tell you a little bit later about what my state of Wyoming has done to innovate in that area.
No, that's great. And Wyoming has really been a leader in this space in terms of encouraging innovation on the business side as well as on the regulatory and legal side. But first, I know that you've highlighted challenges associated with just kind of the level of knowledge around Bitcoin among America's elected leaders and the folks that are being appointed and confirmed into important executive branch positions. So can you tell us a little bit about how you're looking to try to help that with the Senate Financial Innovation Caucus and some of your other efforts?
Absolutely. So what I want to do now that I'm in the US Senate is to spend these early months and perhaps years just helping people in the Senate and the staffers in the Senate understand digital assets and Bitcoin. So I've got some very good books that provide fabulous fundamentals. I'm distributing those. I have formed, along with Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, the Financial Innovations Caucus, so we can use it as a springboard for members of the US Senate and their staffers who are interested in learning more about the benefits of digital assets and specifically Bitcoin. And so Congress will be informed about it at such time as the regulatory issues come bubbling up and potential legislation percolates. We need to know about it because China's way ahead of the United States here. They've already got a prototype digital currency, and we're just getting started thinking about it. So we're behind. We need to stay up here. We need to compete. In fact, we need to dominate in this area. And in order to do it, we have to start now.
No, and it's interesting, this issue of education is so important. You mentioned, and for those who are viewing, who got to hear you on Anthony Pompliano's podcast, and for those who didn't, you made mention of, the importance of reports like those produced by the blockchain analytics firm Chainalysis that talk about the use of cryptocurrency for crime as opposed to criminal activity using cash or the traditional financial institutions and financial system. Can you talk a little bit also about how you would see fighting some of those false narratives?
Well, Chainalysis has really helped with that because it is allowing the vetting and exposure of nefarious uses. And so it's important that there are tools out there to combat that narrative and to indeed combat uses around the world of by nefarious people of Bitcoin and other digital assets. And the fact that Chainalysis exists was really helpful to us when we were visiting with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin at the tail end of the last administration. They were discussing the notion of a Bank Secrecy Act digital asset rule that we were concerned hadn't been adequately vetted. And so we asked for an extended time period to review their proposed rule and give people with expertise in this area the opportunity to comment. And we were granted that additional time. And this should allow people with expertise, people from chain analysis and other providers, as well as experts on Bitcoin, to weigh in on the digital asset rule. So when it does come out, it's reflective of the reality on the ground.
Yeah, and that was so important. And I think you lending your voice to that effort, we were privileged to work with the Chamber of Digital Commerce and its community of members in commenting on that rule and requesting additional time, and now being able to really have the industry be given enough time to really comment in full on those issues. So tell us, though, what Wyoming is doing to help innovation in this space.
Wyoming really has been the leader among states in creating a legislative framework that allows for the creation and chartering of special purpose depository institutions. And 2 of them have been chartered so far in Wyoming. I understand there are about 3 more that are in the pipeline for charters. This allows for financial institutions to retain deposits in Bitcoin and other digital assets. The Wyoming legislature created a chancery court. So just like Delaware does with corporate law, we can begin to have a court that specializes in building the case law necessary to support a robust legal system surrounding digital asset law and case law. So Wyoming's been very foresightful and a big leader in this area. The gentleman who is at the Legislative Service Office who drafted these bills, and then who was at the Wyoming Banking Division implementing those laws, is now with us in the U.S. Senate office. So having him join us, given his deep knowledge of these subjects, has given us a leg up to be leaders on this issue in the United States Senate as well.
No, I think that's exactly right. And it's been great watching the Wyoming legislature pass kind of just multiple rounds of legislation in this space. First setting a foundation and refining it, and then building that out to a regulatory structure. And now, as you mentioned, also a chancery court, because so much of the challenge in this space is achieving some certainty around the legal and regulatory space. And so to set some rules and some processes in Wyoming where it's clear what the expectations are is a really powerful, very powerful development. Do you think that these kinds of developments in these assets could help with what we saw over the last week or two in terms of the purported manipulation in the stock market around certain stocks like GameStop and what was happening with financial technology applications?
That is a great question, one to which I don't have an answer. Do you have some thoughts in that regard? I'd love to hear what you think, because this is a dialogue and I'm learning a lot in this area as we go along. So would you care to comment on that?
That's a great question. I think that some of the entities that have been most active in Wyoming in terms of pushing for legislation and chartering trust companies have also been leaders in looking at how to use blockchain for clearing, settlement, and other kind of end-to-end services on securities and other types of areas. I think about Caitlin Long and some of the other innovators who were from Wyoming and spent time in Wyoming, really pushing on how can this technology help bring greater transparency to markets, as well as helping to remove frictional costs and other types of barriers for individual investors, smaller investors, to be able to access the financial services industry in the same way that larger players have been able to do so over time.
And that is such an important aspect. The fact that Bitcoin is decentralized, the fact that everybody from the guy who's laying bricks down the hall from me here at the Senate office building is just as capable as a Wall Street investor of buying and holding their own private wallet and own Bitcoin, and then just watch it grow in value if indeed that's the direction that it goes, which I think it will. It's a very egalitarian, I think very ubiquitous investment opportunity for individuals, and the transaction costs are very low. You don't need a Wall Street guru to help you with this. So I love the very decentralized nature, the ability for everyday Americans, everyday people all over the world to participate in the ownership of Bitcoin and other digital assets.
So now I know that you talked about your engagements with with then Secretary Mnuchin on the self-hosted wallet rule and on other issues at the end of the last administration. You've also had conversations, at least one conversation, with Secretary Janet Yellen at Treasury. Can you talk a little bit about what you talked about and where you see the Senate and the Treasury going with respect to Bitcoin and digital assets, at least at this beginning stage of the administration?
Yeah, what's fun about this is I see this environment in Washington right now is kind of a we all learn together, including people at the Federal Reserve, at Treasury, and other financial related regulators. We're kind of learning together. And so it's fun. It's fun to be engaged with them on this issue and to not feel at an intellectual disadvantage with regard to how little we all know about this space and how much more experience private sector leaders have in this space, which should allow us all to become informed by people who've been working in the space, actually developed this space, and have a lot of foresight about where it should go and where it can go. So I see the leadership coming from the private sector to the public sector rather than the other way around. And that's why it's so exciting that there is a chamber of commerce for digital, because you're in a position to aggregate or round up a body of knowledge that will be useful to us, not just us in the Senate, but to people in the financial regulatory world that we revolve around. So right now, we're just trying to introduce ourselves to those people, create relationships with those people, and so we can work together when the time comes. And in the meantime, what I'm hoping that Kirsten Sinema and I will be able to do with this Financial Innovations Caucus, since it's largely just a caucus for the purpose of gathering information, disseminating information, and learning more about it, is not only to invite senators and their staffers, but to invite staffers from the regulatory agencies that are here in Washington, D.C., so we can learn about it together and kick around ideas about where we are serving as sort of a clearinghouse or idea clearinghouse for how these ideas can be advanced so we can catch up and even pass the Chinese in this area, and do it in a way that fosters innovation and lets it run, but that is mindful of our role to prevent nefarious action and fraudulent action in this space.
You know, and I think that that's been a real hallmark of the work that's been done in Wyoming, is real engagement across the legislators, across the executive branch, where the work would need to be done, and especially with the innovation community, in inviting in the community of innovators who are working in this space to exchange information and to be part of the dialogue about, what is the right way to proceed in this area. So if there are folks who are listening, who are watching this discussion, is there a way that you recommend that they can kind of follow along with what you and Senator Sinema are going to be doing with the Financial Innovation Caucus?
Well, right now I'd like you to just contact us at Sen Lummis, S-E-N Lummis, or through my official website. But when Senator Sinema and I get this up and running, we want to use the technology that is available to us to stay in touch with the innovators in this area. So by all means, let us know if you're interested in participating in teaching us, informing us, advising us, and nurturing our knowledge and understanding in this area, because we're very open to that. I was sitting I shouldn't say this, but during the impeachment hearing, I was sitting during the hearing with a gentleman behind me. I was sort of paging through this book on Bitcoin, and he said, "Hey, could you get me one of those? I'm kind of interested in learning about this." So it became an opportunity to get a book to him. Not that we weren't paying attention to the impeachment trial, but just when you needed a break from the intensity of it, there was something you could read about that really does ramp up the body of knowledge here in the Senate. So we want to take advantage of those same opportunities as we go forward with the Innovation Caucus.
No, it is quite a thing, and we keep a small library of books as well for attorneys who want to get involved in this space. And I find myself sending out, a couple of foundational books that I think about. I've made my parents and my brother read them and send them to friends, et cetera. And it really is it's a great way of bringing people into the space. And I think you've talked about the competitiveness issue, but I think also what's notable, and you've talked about, is that it's not a partisan issue. That, the fact that the U.S. should be competitive in the crypto asset space and the financial technology space, that's not a partisan issue between the parties.
Absolutely right. And that's one of the most exciting things for me about it, because, I come to Washington at a highly partisan charged time. And so trying to find issues to work on that are very bipartisan and bicameral is just a wonderful way to form relationships so that when we do get to more gnarly, more partisan issues, you already have an established relationship with people in this nonpartisan space. So that's yet another thing I like about it. If you would have seen all these Wyoming cowboys, the cowboy hats, the Tyler Lindholm and Ogden Driscoll working with Democrats in the Wyoming legislature, professors at the university, and Caitlin Long, and so many people, Chris Land, who is with us now, all working together. It was the strangest collection of people that you could imagine putting together to work on Bitcoin. So if cowboys and suits can work together in Wyoming and come up with a very innovative legislative framework for this to go forward, my gosh, it can be done anywhere.
Well, that is a great transition, because I don't want you to go anywhere, but I think that Mayor Suarez has joined us at this point, and I'd love to bring him into this conversation. So Mayor Suarez, if you can jump in and maybe just tell us for a minute or two what you are doing in Miami with respect to Bitcoin and crypto assets, and to make Miami a hub for investigating these issues, this technology, and putting it to use.
Well, first of all, thank you, Alan and Senator Lummis. Thank you so much for the invitation. We're obviously big fans of the senator's work. And you know, they often say that imitation is the highest form of flattery. So one of the things that we want to do is imitate Wyoming's very successful integration of crypto into their community. I love the explanation the senator was giving prior to me coming on, and the coalition that she had to create to become, you know, basically the most crypto friendly state in the country. And you know, I think for us, uh, you know, we feel as Florida and of course as the city of Miami that we want to get in on the ground floor like she has so ably led. I agree wholeheartedly with the point that she made before I got on, that this is a nonpartisan issue, and this is, you know, and we have to as a country continue to look for those kinds of issues that we can collaborate on and that we can move the agenda of this country forward. And I think being forward thinking, being on the cusp of the knowledge-based innovation economy that we know is dominating more and more of our entire economy, is important for regions to thrive. At the city of Miami, we looked at what the senator has done and what Wyoming has done. And we have a bill that we've proposed to the state legislature that will mirror a lot of Wyoming's laws in terms of being crypto friendly. In the city, we wanted to take it just a step further. And just last Thursday or 2 Thursdays ago, I proposed to the city commission a resolution that did three things. The first is it allowed for our employees to take a percentage of their salaries in Bitcoin if they so desired. Number two, it allowed our residents to pay for fees and taxes in Bitcoin to the city. And number three, it created an opportunity for us to study the possibility of investing in crypto and in Bitcoin, particularly in terms of our treasury and in terms of our pension investments. So those three things are ongoing right now. We probably will engage a third party for 1 and 2. That will be an exchange agent that will take whatever cash we give to our employees, convert it into crypto and give it to our employees, or whatever crypto is given to us by our residents, convert it into cash and give it to us in the form of cash. And then of course, you know, there may be some additional laws that are needed to allow the city of Miami to invest in Bitcoin. But I think for me, what's interesting about this discussion, and I'd love to hear Senator Lummis's take on this, is, you know, the reason why Bitcoin was created and why it's had so much success is because, number one, you know, I think people wanted an efficient mechanism to transfer things of value, something of value, right? Without necessarily being tethered to central bank policy, right? And I think that is something that we need to be mindful of and be reflective of and understand, why would somebody want to do that, right? So, you know, when we look at, you know, a major spending bill, and again, it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on. I happen to be Republican, but to me, again, I don't look at all these things as partisan issues per se. But you look at the amount of money that we could be creating in terms of the money supply in just a few months. It does cause concern about potential devaluation of the dollar. And when you know, rather than people scurrying into buying euros or French francs or any other currency, you know, there's another option that they have. And I firmly believe, number one, the highest paid player in the NFL is not going to get paid next year the most amount of money because they're the best player in the NFL. They're getting paid the most amount of money because they asked for 50% of their salary in Bitcoin. So I find that to be interesting, right? And for the naysayers and the doubters out there, you know, and I think number two, I think we need to have a discussion, a debate, and I'd love to hear the senator's thoughts on this. We need to have a debate about the role of monetary policy. You know, what do we expect from our central banks? What do we want from them? You know what I mean? What kind of social engineering is okay and not okay, right? I understand that their objective is to keep everything sort of in equilibrium, right? And we appreciate that. But at the same time, we've seen what central bank policies, maybe not so much in the United States, but in other countries, what kind of you know, cataclysmic you know, things have happened as a result of bad policy. So, you know, to me, it's not in any way, shape, or form surprising that Bitcoin has gained as much popularity. And frankly, I believe that you know that Bitcoin is a few announcements away from really exploding. I mean, people talk about the fact that it may be over, whether it's overvalued or not at 57, 52. I'm not even sure where it's at today. But you know, but the truth is, if Amazon tomorrow came out and said, hey, we're going to accept Bitcoin as a payment method, if Apple came out tomorrow and said, hey, we're going to accept Bitcoin as a payment method, you are now creating what was previously viewed mostly as a commodity, right? And you are converting it into a currency, and that is very real. And so you know, I think of myself in the sort of following in the footsteps of Senator Lummis, who's a real pioneer, and wanting to be in the forefront of this digital revolution that is part of the knowledge-based economy that is transforming our world every single day. And any city in America that doesn't get it, any city in America that is not driving a truck through that reality is really, frankly, doing a disservice, not just to my generation, but to my son's generation and my daughter's generation. My son is 7 and my daughter's 3. So that's the vision that I have for my city. That's a vision that I think we all have for America, that America can be the most digitally competitive country in the world. And if we're not, then we're going to get behind some of these other superpowers, and we don't want to do that going into a new generation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and echoes very much, Senator, what you were talking about. So, Senator, I mean, what are your thoughts based on what the mayor has said, and what lessons do you think that Wyoming can offer for a jurisdiction like Miami that wants to take these types of steps that the mayor has laid out?
Well, Mayor, first of all, I'm so impressed with your vision on this. As you know, local governments and states are the innovators of innovation. It rarely comes from the top. And your statements about allowing, hopefully in the future, for investment of your pension funds and retirement funds in Bitcoin really will allow the people who participate in those funds to have a store of value that is the closest thing right now to gold that we've had. And it is in a format that they can use in the future and save for now that will be a great store of value. Your interest in being an innovator and leader in advancing the financial transaction component of this is huge. Because that's something that my state hasn't done yet. So I would say this: you could look at Wyoming's legislative framework as a template and then build on it to layer on the additional components of transacting business in Bitcoin. Right now, our special purpose depository institutions are to retain deposits, but they don't function like a full bank does. Community bank on the streets of Miami or on the streets of Casper, Wyoming. But it sounds like you want to head in that direction. So
Absolutely.
what you would be doing is providing additional innovation in this space and then beginning to be an advocate for the investment of pension funds all over this country in Bitcoin. And I think that would do a lot as a store of value, because people, when they retire, want to have assets that have continued to grow while they've continued to work, and that will spend in a way that adds value where the US dollar and other currencies cannot, because they're issued by central banks. And central banks, at least our Federal Reserve Bank, has inflation built into it. I mean, 2% inflation per year is the goal of the Federal Reserve. And so if you have inflation built into your business model, so to speak, the dollar is going to be worth less and less over time. So having assets like Bitcoin, a great store of value, as part of the mix, and just part of the mix. You know, you need a diversified asset allocation in a retirement fund. But if Bitcoin's part of that mix, you have that store of value that you can buy and hold And then it's there in those retirement years for the people who've worked so hard for the city of Miami to retire on. So I commend you. I'm really excited about what you're doing as a city, and I'll be watching you. And if we can do anything to help, Mayor, in our office, let us know, because we kind of stole a lot of the intellectual capital out of Wyoming when I came to Congress, so we could deploy it here. And we would love to help you, because we can learn from you too.
Thank you so much.
Let me ask you that, Mayor, just in the 1 minute that we have left. You know, we've had advocates in the House of Representatives and the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, but to have now Senator Lummis and Senator Sinema in the Senate, what would be the one thing that you would ask that would be, do you think would be most helpful to you for Congress and the Financial Innovation Caucus in the Senate to advocate for?
I think two things. I'm sorry if I say two, and I'll try to make them quick. I think the most important is regulatory stability. There needs to be a federal regulatory framework where people who participate in anything related to crypto have a sense that the government's not going to come and just shut it down. You know, I think one of the biggest risks to crypto investments is this fear of the future, that at some point the central banks are going to get so fearful that they can't control this asset, that they're going to regulate it out of existence. So I think that, you know, having a clear message from the federal government is important. And then one of the things that they often ask me in my interviews is about some of the statements of the Treasury Secretary. So I know that you don't control the Treasury Secretary, but you know, it would be nice if the Treasury Secretary was a little less hostile to crypto, because it makes it hard. You know, when I'm in an interview and someone quotes the secretary, the Treasury Secretary, and I'm here sort of debating, you know, the head of you know, they're like, what do you know? You're just the mayor of a city. You know, how can you take on the Treasury Secretary? And I try to say, well, you know, the Harvard endowment knows a lot about a lot of things, and Yale endowment knows a lot, and I think Elon Musk knows a lot about a lot of things, and I think there's a lot of people that have put billions of dollars that know a lot about a lot of things, that have invested a tremendous amount. So, I mean, I know that you can't regulate what is said by the Treasury Secretary, but I do think if there was a common framework, bipartisan, like you've said before, of how the federal government's going to treat Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, that would be very helpful if everyone were speaking from the same voice.
Well, look, I think we could continue to have this conversation all day and into the evening, but we don't want to intrude too much on your time. So let me first say thank you very much, Senator Lummis, Mayor Suarez, for joining us today and for having that conversation. This conversation is very illuminating, and I hope that we get to see great things, not just from the city of Miami, not just from the Senate Financial Innovation Caucus, but from all of us working together to drive forward some of these issues. So thank you very much. I'm also going to use that comment as a transition to our next segment, which is a discussion about the Treasury Department's most recent proposed rulemaking, often referred to as the self-hosted wallet rulemaking, but there's a number of different pieces of guidance and rules in that document. So let me turn over now to Amy Davine Kim from the Chamber of Commerce and my colleague, my partner, Shannon Coffin at Steptoe, for a discussion of where we are on that rule and on FinCEN's rulemaking and what we can expect going forward.
Yeah, Alan, what a fantastic discussion from a U.S. senator and a mayor of a major U.S. city. You know, it was really refreshing, to be honest, to hear their support and their curiosity and desire to move forward in the space. So thank you, Alan, for leading that conversation. As Alan mentioned, Shannon Coffin from Steptoe and I are here to talk today about Treasury's proposals regarding self-hosted or self-managed wallets, which is a term that means Bitcoin and other digital assets that you manage yourself, whether you as an individual hold it yourself or a company that holds digital assets on its own. So we'll also talk about what's on the horizon for this issue, what we can expect for this proposed rule and beyond. So first, let's consider where we are right now in the midst of a third iteration of a proposed rule and comment period. It's a comment period that offered 60 days to respond this time, 4 times the original 15 days proposed in the first rule. So just for those of you trying to track the timeline, the first proposed rule was formally published on December 23rd, due January 4th. The second revision of that was published January 15th with some updates and a bifurcated response deadlines. There were 2 response deadlines at that point. And then there was a third and the current revision to that proposed rule published on January 28th. And that is a 60-day comment period. So it's hard to keep track. That's a lot. But there's some really interesting dynamics at play that got us here. And ultimately what I'd like to focus on is kind of what the real story is here to me, is that the industry came together. We heard Senator Lummis talk about having her own conversations and putting in her own letter on this topic and a letter to the secretary at the time. And others, and the chamber as well, came together and we were heard on a topic that's extraordinarily important. And we'll explain why in the few minutes that we have. And we successfully achieved more time to consider the important issues raised by this process, just as the senator mentioned. And so it really is necessary for experts in this space, both inside and outside government, to collaborate to best address the growth and, if necessary, the regulation of this industry. So Shannon, let me ask you to reflect a little on this impact and maybe overall on what I've just described, which seems to me to be a little bit of a haphazard nature of the agency process that we've just experienced. What are your perspectives on that and the importance of really this industry maturing and coming together and making an important statement?
Amy, it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk about this. Look, this is a really this process has been, like you say, haphazard, and it illustrates a couple of the points that Mayor Suarez was talking about. First, you had a Secretary of the Treasury in Secretary Mnuchin who didn't trust this space, who didn't understand it entirely and wanted to get a handle on it. And when regulators don't fully understand and don't fully trust particular practices, their desire is to stop them. Well, Mnuchin didn't go that far, but he proposed disclosure rules under the Bank Secrecy Act for unhosted wallets, but he did so in a very, very accelerated process. The mayor talked about regulatory stability. Well, what our regulatory state is supposed to be built on is a deliberative, thoughtful process, and this was anything but. The proposed rule dropped 2 days before Christmas, giving the entire industry about 6 business days over the holidays to address a paradigm shift, really a regulatory paradigm shift that brought digital assets well within the Bank Secrecy Act structure for the first time, and the industry responded in remarkable with a remarkable alacrity. But even so, the department, FinCEN, asked a couple of dozen questions that simply couldn't be answered within such a short period of time. So the Chamber of Digital Commerce and others, including the senator, pushed back and said, look, this is too important to rush to try to create a midnight regulation that goes into effect at the end of the Trump administration. This process needs to take more time. And fortunately, FinCEN heard that and realized when they got 7,000 comments within a 2-week period, a lot of which said, we can't possibly answer all the questions that you're asking, let's take our time. They realized they needed more time, and they needed to give the public that notice and comment period that the Administrative Procedure Act really is built upon.
So yeah, that, oh, sorry, Shannon. So
No, no.
that's a, I mean, that's a really important point. And let's maybe level set right now as far as what was it that is such a paradigm shift, right? What is it that really elevated this? I think any regulatory issue takes more than 15 days to address, and it's pretty customary to have much more time than that. But in this case, it is pretty extraordinary. And so let me just quickly run through. The proposed rule has two components to it. One is a record keeping requirement under the Bank Secrecy Act, which is an anti-money laundering statute. So at transactions of $3,000 and above, banks and MSBs, money services businesses, must verify their customer's identity for transactions of $3,000 or more and obtain at least the name and physical address of all the counterparties to the transaction. And the second component is a reporting requirement. So they would have to report, banks and MSBs must report information to the government. And that would be at $10,000, they would report on a transaction value report. It would be a new report that they're creating that would have that information and be reported to the government. And so those two considerations, the inclusion of verifying all counterparties to a transaction, is unique, as well as reporting that information to the government, where we've seen in the news, the government itself has had a difficult time keeping private information private. So that why create an additional vulnerability for that information? So let me, Shannon, let's just kind of reflect on that kind of mismatch of the stated justifications of the rule.
That's right. The FinCEN has responded to the process issues that the industry had and given the industry more time to comment. But there are a lot of substantive issues that FinCEN's going to have to wrestle with going forward. And the counterparty requirement that you mentioned is one of the key ones. FinCEN proposed this rule and suggested it was simply a modest extension of fiat currency transaction reporting and record keeping requirements. But there's no analog in the fiat currency regulations for this counterparty requirements. When I do a transaction, when a bank customer does a transaction for $10,000 or more with someone else, that someone else doesn't have to be reported by the bank to the Department of Treasury as part of the Bank Secrecy Act. And so the suggestion that FinCEN makes in its notice of proposed rulemaking, that this is a modest extension of existing regulations, is really just wrong. And it mounts an entirely new challenge for this phase of the rulemaking, and that is FinCEN's going to have to wrestle with the ramifications of this reporting requirement for counterparties, and what may happen when banks aren't able to discern who owns an unhosted wallet that or the exchanges that its customers are doing business with. And when they can't get that information, when the customer doesn't know the information and can't provide the information, what's FinCEN going to do? If FinCEN says, well, you have to report or else, I think what's going to happen is what you like to call de-risking. What's going to happen is banks and exchanges are going to stop doing these transactions with unhosted wallets. What FinCEN hasn't done as part of its proposed rule is it hasn't wrestled with this de-risking risk. It said this is a modest extension of just reporting requirements and record keeping requirements. That can't possibly cost that much to the economy. But if the effect of this rule is to shut off, is to be an effective de facto ban on certain transactions, because the only way exchanges and banks can really comply with the rule is to stop letting their customers do transactions with unhosted wallets, then there's a significant regulatory impact of this rule that that the agency hasn't even identified and hasn't wrestled with. So the agency is going to have to talk in its final rule, if it continues down this road. The agency is going to have to talk about both the risk of de-risking, that is the risk that these transactions are going to be shut down, and the cost of doing so. And Amy, one of your favorite topics, and one that the one that the chamber has covered in its own comment letter, are the privacy implications of this counterparty reporting requirement. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, and just to respond a little bit to what you said too about the counterparty information, you will have to rely on your customer, and that's, that kind of circumstance has been, has had to go through some consideration in the past when certain information under other rules imposed on banks, for example. It takes quite a bit of understanding how to do that, and using a risk-based approach, which is the typical standard for the Bank Secrecy Act. So to pick up on what you said, I mean, to me, the biggest area of concern that everybody should be aware of, but I don't think many people understand, is that when you require a bank or a money services business, like an exchange, to report information about a transaction to the government, think about the information that's required: your name, your address, and the name and address of everybody involved, the transaction hash, and wallet information, and transaction values and amounts and things like that. When you provide all that information to the government, it's no longer a transaction report. You're not just saying, here's this one transaction that was valued at over $10,000. What you're providing is visibility into every transaction that every party to that, the entire financial history that every party to that transaction has engaged in the past, present, and will in the future. And that's pretty extraordinary. It's no longer this transaction you need to know about. It's these people you now need to know about and their wallets. And you'll have
this again, Amy, is not a modest extension of fiat currency reporting requirements, which are transaction specific. When someone does a $10,000 transaction with cash, you don't find out the entire history of its counterparty and the account holder itself. But here, given the nature of the blockchain and the open source nature of the ledger, the government and the banks and the government are essentially open. They're having an entire history of accounts and owners open to them in a way that just isn't the case under existing law.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's, again, I mean, just people need to understand what that means. If you were making a transaction with your bank, or you're transacting with somebody else and they have a bank account, you are now exposed to that bank and to the government, when you would never have expected that to be the case otherwise, for all your transactions, past, present, and future. So that's such a fundamental shift that we really need to think through what that means to just common interest in financial privacy. We all know if we're a customer of an organization or a bank, for example, or a money services business, they're going to know your account activity. That's a decision you've made. You've given them your information so they can, understand you and know about you and feel comfortable about you as their customer. But it's a lot big, it's such a big expansion of that principle.
So the chamber's really taking a leadership role here, Amy, and filed extensive comments already in a very abbreviated period of time. Amy Kim gave up her Christmas, to make this happen, and we'll be filing additional comments now that there's more time to do so. And really, I applaud the role that you're taking in making sure these privacy interests, these regulatory cost concerns are front and center with the regulators.
Well, thanks for that, Shannon. I'm glad we can laugh about it now. I feel like it's maybe not far enough in the past to do that, but I'll still talk to my therapist about it. So the only other kind of rounding it out point is that, a lot of this information is already available to law enforcement, and law enforcement is effectively using blockchains to track and trace and catch illicit actors. So there's a lot of value in the blockchain as it is, that is also not considered here. And at the same time, under a recent law that was passed in the middle of this whole process, Congress is directing FinCEN to reevaluate its currency transaction report process, among other things, many other things, but that was a component. So, there's a lot at stake here, and we need to work on this carefully. And so, I guess just kind of to round out our thinking here, these issues involving self-hosted wallets or self-managed wallets are under consideration in a number of places, not just in the US. We're definitely focused on the US right now because of the time pressures that we have. But multilaterally, the Financial Action Task Force, they're a multi-governmental organization that sets these standards. They're looking at this as well as others. And so this is an area that we have to have a strong, unified voice, just like we did earlier this year and late last year, to make sure that the regulators understand all of the value and the benefits of this technology and how to best approach it in the coming months and years. So I'll maybe conclude that the Chamber, with the help of our friends at Steptoe, are preparing a second response to this rule, which is due on March 29th. And for those of you listening, we would love for you to join us. As we've been able to show, the more voices that engage in the process, the better. So with that, thank you, Shannon, for all of your help and support, and continued help and support, and to Alan as well. And Perianne, over to you.
Thank you so much, Amy. And thank you, Shannon, and the whole team at Steptoe. As Amy and Shannon highlighted, the proposed rule from FinCEN is truly a significant potential threat to the growth of the digital asset industry in the US. And we did make meaningful advancements at preventing this rule from being rushed through the regulatory process. And we truly appreciate all of the hard work of both Amy and the team at Steptoe, Shannon, Alan, Jason Weinstein, and there were many others that did give up their holiday vacations to ensure the industry had proper representation during this time, to be on the ground in Washington to make sure that these rules are not put through in a way that could stifle this critically important industry. As Amy mentioned, the comment period is currently open. We were successfully able to get that comment period extended, and the Chamber is in the process of preparing comments to FinCEN. Steptoe is helping us with those. For anyone who is interested in supporting this process or being a part of this process, we invite you to join our membership at the Chamber of Digital Commerce and participate in the AML task force, which is led by Amy Kim, our Chief Policy Officer. You can apply for membership at digitalchamber.org today. I also want to thank our sponsor of Steptoe, who truly has been a critical partner in our work at the Chamber of Digital Commerce for many years. Thank you, Steptoe. Thank you, Alan and Shannon, for all your support and for being with us today for this amazing conversation. To echo the comments of Mayor Suarez and Senator Lummis, it is so important that regulators get this right, because we have everything to lose if we don't. Think about it. Cryptocurrencies are transforming the global economic landscape. There are many nations around the world that truly understand this, and they're looking to dominate in this space. And in order to ensure America's preeminence globally, we must have clear statements of support from our government leaders and a clear regulatory framework for businesses. I want to thank Senator Lummis and Mayor Suarez for being champions of our industry, for joining us at our event today, and for ensuring that their respective states and cities have a welcoming place for innovators and operators and investors in cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. And I also want to thank each and every person that joined us today on Parallel. Please visit us at digitalchamber.org and sign up for our email newsletters to receive invitations to our future events. We have a prolific program of parallel events we'll be rolling out throughout all of 2021. Again, thanks for joining us today. I'm Perry Boring, the founder and president of the Chamber of Digital Commerce. We'll see you next time.